Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 12th of January 2023. I've just done a short update video on what's taking place in the Red Sea, or at least trying to explain it in terms of economics rather than in the way that many people are trying to claim that it is somehow a defense of the Israeli genocide in Palestine and so on and so forth. You know, it's not that. Those are two separate issues, and that's what that video hopes to set out. Anyway, on to Ukraine, and we'll start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, to these claims, and you can find them in the description to the video below. 840 personnel lost is another high number, well, the same as yesterday. 800, 840, and then 840. We are seeing it up around that level. Those are high numbers, if not the highest. We have seen 1,380 as the highest, which is a phenomenal number to lose in a day. 840 is still a really high loss rate for the Russians. 10 tanks, not as high as it has been, but still a significant loss. 16 APVs, 11 artillery systems dropping back down, but all of these together on a consistent basis, I think equate to an unsustainable loss for the Russians. We have seen it truly unsustainable, but just not at the moment in terms of artillery pieces, at least. One anti-aircraft warfare system, 16 vehicles and fuel tanks, 2 pieces of special equipment. I don't think, although it says one drone now, I don't think we've seen Shaheeds now. I think Shaheed trackers said last night there were no Shaheeds sent. That's 3 days in a row, I think. And again, it goes back to if the Russians could, they would. They aren't, so they can't. I would interpret it in that way. So I don't think the Russians have the cruise missiles and Shaheeds to be able to fire on a consistent basis. So you see these spikes as they get them in, prepare them, fire them. Have to wait for them to be produced or procured, get them in, prepare them, fire them. Wait, get them in. So that's how it works, rather than having huge stockpiles where they can continually fire missiles and Shaheeds. Okay, going on to what Andrew Perpetua says as he surveys the social media platforms to try and get a sense of what has been destroyed on a daily basis. And as you can see, this is a very good day for the Ukrainians, where this is, I don't know, probably a 7-to-1 ratio, something like that, probably 6-7-to-1. Loss ratio of Russians to Ukrainian losses. The Ukrainians have lost a couple of bits of artillery, M777 in there. The Russians have lost a couple of surveillance and comm pieces. Another engineering vehicle. In fact, they've been losing quite a few engineering vehicles lately, and I think Andrew Perpetua's commenting on that in one of his recent live streams. They've lost a number of Brem engineering vehicles, which I think is a bit of an issue for them. It means you can't get damaged bits of kit off the battlefield to fix them up or capture bits of kit, so on and so forth. It just really hurts your ability to regenerate lost equipment. So we have an APC in there and a boat and a couple of bits of artillery, a tank, a number of pieces of IFVs, the BMP3s and BMP1s, and not mainly, but a lot of trucks and civilian vehicles thrown in as well. So a bit of a spread over everything, just equating to the Russians losing an awful lot more than the Ukrainians, and that therefore being to the advantage of the Ukrainians. If they keep that kind of ratio going, then you will prevail in the war, because Russia cannot keep losing like 7-to-1, 6-7-to-1 pieces of kit to the Ukrainian pieces lost. So yeah, this was an interesting claim yesterday from Zelensky himself. So 12 planes and 26 helicopters were destroyed by the Ukrainian air defense in a day with the means provided by partners. This was announced by Volodymyr Zelensky in a meeting with representatives of the Baltic mass media. I have no idea what that refers to and whether how true that is. It could be the day that the ATACMS did their thing, and there was no really official word on how many pieces of kit were destroyed. You had OSINT doing their thing and saying, well, we've seen 14 here and whatever. but I don't know that the Ukrainians officially said how much stuff was taken out. Is he talking about that? Were there other strikes that we don't know about that took place on that same day with ATACMS again? I mean, you heard about the strike on Luhansk and Berdyansk airfields, but were there other places? It's difficult to know. But, this is either propaganda that is just an outright falsehood, or he's telling us things that we were otherwise unaware of. Yeah, interesting. And of course, if that's true, that's massive. Absolutely massive. Right, Moscow hordes keep surrendering in the south, says PS01. Russians transferred troops from the south to Kherson and to Kupiansk and Bakhmut area. What's left hardly handles their front lines. I wouldn't go so far as to say that or agree with that. The idea is that they are, reinforcing the Dnipro River area and the Kupiansk and Bakhmut areas with troops from the southern front line in Zaporizhia, where things have quietened down. But there are indeed still, I saw some announcements from, remember where, that the Ukrainians have repelled a number of attacks in the south over the last 24 hours. So I don't know that it means that I don't know how true this is and whether it's anecdotal. I do think the Russians are losing a number of troops to POWs. I've seen a slight uptick in footage over the last 3 or 4 days that might indicate they are losing a few troops that way. I don't know that they are particularly weak on the southern front line. I think that might be quite hopeful thinking here from PS01. I referenced this in my frontline video yesterday. I actually had it lined up to show you here today. Just an assault group in the Kharkiv direction being transported on tanks that got hit by cluster munitions. After dismounting, chaos ensued as the group dispersed. Some got wounded and no one could understand where they were. Successful stop of a Russian attack before it reached Ukrainian positions. This is a 7.5 minute video that's really interesting. It gives you a valuable insight into the fog of war, the chaos of war, the terror of cluster munitions, actually, you get from this video. I can't really show you much of it other than the early bit of him driving on a tank through the forest, one presumes somewhere near Sinkivka maybe, driving in a convoy at the crack of dawn, it looks like, and then cluster munitions hit. Everyone jumps off the vehicles and runs into the forest. They don't know where they are. People are shooting all over the shop. People are injured. It's pretty hardcore. There's nothing graphic about it, but it just gives you a sense of what's going on and the noises and the chaos. And when you don't have good comms, who are you? Where are you running from and to? Do you know where my mate Uho is? I've heard he's injured, blah, blah, blah. Who's shooting? Who are they firing at? Because it sounds like the Russians are just firing into the distance with small arms fire. Nothing and anything. Like, I don't know that Ukraine is particularly close by, but they are hitting them with cluster munitions. It's just a really, really valuable insight into what kind of goes on in some of these maneuvers or some of these events. Right. Talking about losses, I haven't got too much really to show you in this category. Chechnya, headquarters of the Russian 70th Motorized Rifle Regiment, burned. I mean, goodness. Chechnya is a funny old place because it has had, two wars there. And Ramzan Kadyrov, his father, fought for the other side. And then he kind of switched it because money, I guess. And now Kadyrov is leading Chechnya and supporting Russia, but there's got to be a number of Chechnyans, civilians, people on the ground there who hate Russia. Surely there have to be many, and I'm just waiting for an opportunity for this warlord to cease to exist. And here we can see a headquarters burning down. You'd assume that is some kind of sabotage rather than careless smoker. Anyway, moving to distance munitions strikes and so on and so forth. As you can see, not a lot to report because there's not been a lot of activity. On the night of January 11th, an unknown drone flew 400 kilometers over Russia and crashed into an aircraft repair plant in Voronezhskaya Narodnaya in Borisoglepsk. The company repairs military equipment for the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Unfortunately, the plant did not burn down next time. These things, even if there aren't huge amounts of losses or there isn't a huge amount of damage done to the targets, what it says is that we can hit this area. We are upscaling our drone production to the point where, and there's more to say about that with regard to what the UK has done today. Really good news from the UK. But I'll talk about it in the next video. You can see an explosion in the background there. What this says is we can hit this base or this repair facility, and you now need to think about how you defend it. So do they then go and get valuable air defense assets, which we know have been degraded? We know that Crimea is struggling for air defense capability. Well, if you're going to then be the Russian army thinking, right, where do we have to most defend? Where do we defend? Put our best air defense networks. Well, obviously it's going to be Moscow, but then outside and St. Petersburg, outside of that, it's going to be right. You're having to make these dilemma decisions. Well, do we defend Crimea or do we defend this repair facility out in the sticks? Okay, Crimea really is going to be our number one objective, and the Ukrainians go, okay, fair enough. We'll just go and hit this place because now we know we can. When we build enough drones. Like I said over the last couple of days, with this ramping up of drone production and with many international entities allied to Ukraine going, yeah, we need to be working on drone production and drone procurement on behalf of Ukraine, for Ukraine. In light of that, you are going to start seeing big wave attacks into Russia. And we've just had an announcement yesterday from Rinkovitz in Latvia saying that actually they support, I think it was Latvia, we support, said Latvia, the use of Western weapons into Russia to hit military targets. Well, wouldn't it be interesting if you start getting weapons that come through Latvia from the West? Like, yeah, we're not happy with using, for example, I'm going to use an example, we're not happy with Storm Shadows or ATACMS being used in Ukraine to hit Russian targets inside the territory of Russia, and then you can somehow procure those same weapons through Latvia, and Latvia saying, yeah, we're cool with it, and then suddenly you can use, well, I don't know whether that kind of thing will happen eventually, but what we would like to see, what I would like to see, is more and more nations saying that, yeah, it's fine to hit targets like this with weapons provided by the West. Okay, explosions reported in Belgorod. Again, Belgorod is being repeatedly hit by the Ukrainians. One presumes and hopes that they are military targets being hit consistently, or at least aimed for. And then unexplained reports of explosions in occupied Mariupol first thing this morning. Blasts rocked the Livobrezhny district in the northeastern suburbs, but were heard throughout the city and the port city, according to locals. So, yeah, Mariupol being struck as well. Now we're moving on to other bits and pieces. So, otherwise, a fairly quiet night for the Russians in attacking Ukraine and for the Ukrainians attacking Russia as well. I mean, a few reports, but not too much else. Right. I've been reporting on this for a number of days now, and it doesn't seem to be relenting. So, power outage schedules in Moscow. So they are now informing about scheduled planned power outages. Dear residents of Moscow and the Moscow region, in connection with carrying out preventative and repair work aimed at improving the quality and reliability of service provision, we're going to, we're informing you of planned power outages. So they are trying to do something about the lack of electricity and heating and so on and so forth that is causing many civilians around Russia are real issues. So here we have the central heating pipe laid down in 1974 being ruptured and flooded in Novosibirsk. This is, remember, the third biggest city in Russia. Multiple districts without heating or hot water in minus 25 degree nighttime temperatures. I mean, this is huge. Now, although that's kind of steam, you can see that is all I presume that that's flooding as well. So all the water, this is steam coming off the water that is flooding down here. So yeah, huge problem for that Russian neighborhood. Russia in Kminki, just 10 miles or 16 kilometers from the Kremlin. 215 apartment buildings, 8 schools, 17 kindergartens, 4 clinics, and a hospital are without heating or hot water in freezing temperatures. And that's been for the case for a week. I mean, it's absolutely huge. And when you have these, as we see in Ukraine and Russia, these centralized heating systems as the best way to provide heating for either whole areas or apartment blocks, then if they go wrong, then that's affecting an awful lot of people. British intelligence even saying yesterday Ukraine is currently experiencing a cold snap with temperatures struggling to rise above freezing over the next week, leading to lower ground temperatures. As the ground freezes, the conditions for cross-country movement will certainly improve throughout January and into February before thawing in March. The thaw will lead to a corresponding deterioration in conditions for cross-country movement. So in terms of the military maneuvers, as the ground hardens when it's this cold, it's actually easier to move. Although it's snowy and icy and horrible in that respect, actually for movement it's easier. Coupled with the freezing temperatures is an increase in snow cover throughout Ukraine. Snow depth is likely to be a limiting factor for maneuverability. So on the other hand, you can move more easily because the ground is frozen, but then you're having to deal with snow drifts and deep snow. The worsening conditions will be compounded by shortened daylight hours, making operation conditions difficult for both sides. You'll have to rely on cold weather and night vision equipment to operate. Anyway, Janky. Oh, actually, what I want to do is look at something else that Janky have said earlier today. Let's go back to it was him. Yeah, here we are. This I thought was quite interesting. Does God hate Russia? Point here is talking about the cold snap. I mean, this is a real challenge for the Russians. I mean, long has been, right? You can go back to Napoleonic times to see how much of an issue climate is, the weather is in Russia, and trying to attack Russia militarily has caused issues for Napoleon as much as it has for Hitler in the Second World War. Anyway, just for living, this is for the Russians. This is a massive challenge. And the present weather at the moment is not doing them any favors and is causing all sorts of problems, exacerbated by the fact that the central government has been kleptocratically stealing money from civilians effectively to enable Putin to become the richest human being on earth. Meanwhile, heating systems and infrastructure, energy infrastructure around Russia is not funded adequately. Now, as his barbaric slaves nod in agreement, Putin tells the filthy barbarians, says Jay and Kiev, so he's obviously some strong rhetoric from him, that the egg shortage and high prices are because Russians are now just too damn rich. So the richest man in the world then says, hey, the reason why you guys are paying too much for your eggs and there are these queues outside egg vans and whatnot, is because actually you're all too rich. Russians are just too well off, and so because we're so well off, we're paying more for eggs. It's like, the inflationary pressures from that. It could be that wage price spiral, etc. Like, really, and at the same time, given the kind of egg stories that have been coming out recently, and the lack of eggs in Russia, the hike of prices, and then Russia having to go to Turkey and Azerbaijan to import eggs on the quick. 20% of chicken eggs from the first batch of imports to the Russian Federation from Turkey and Azerbaijan may be infected with bird flu, salmonella, and botulism. Quote, Roselkosnadzor appealed to everyone who has used products containing eggs to immediately donate blood for appropriate tests. The entire batch of edible eggs, which was imported on January the 3rd through the Iran Kazmalya checkpoint from Turkey to the amount of 19.36 tons, so 316,800 eggs, for further sale on the territory of Russia is subject to seizure. I mean, goodness me, could it get any worse? Oh, well, yeah, it can, obviously, but it's didn't write this stuff. Okay, now to go back to Scott Ritter. Now, If you had any doubts about the moral caliber of this prize wingnut, then now's your time to shed those doubts. If you read this, worth remembering that Kadyrov's father was a separatist leader who wanted freedom from Russia, but suddenly switched sides, presumably when a load of money was offered. Now, as Francis Scar says here, I imagine this will offend a lot of people in the US. Still, in Russia, Scott Ritter has given Ramzan Kadyrov a US Marine Corps combat knife with his name and Akhmat Sila, a phrase used as part of the Chechen personality cult of Kadyrov's father, engraved on the leather sheath. You have Scott Ritter giving an oppressive warlord a gift as he schmaltzes and cozies up to the man in Chechnya, which is effectively occupied by Russia, with the warlord doing the bidding of the Kremlin. And at the beginning of the war, people are like, oh, you should listen to Scott Ritter more. Oh, he's objective, he's neutral. Yeah, he's telling you the truth about what's going on. Forward wind 2 years, and the guy is just a Kremlin mouthpiece. Here is evidence of that. Anyway, to finish, meanwhile in Russia, conversations between doctors and patients will be wiretapped by the government, I guess, just in case someone says, I'm sick of this war. This is part of my new segment. It's an ongoing segment. By giving it the name, it's like, this is what liberty looks like. Segment, this is what liberty looks like. Meanwhile in Russia, Moscow clinics will introduce wiretapping of conversations between doctors and patients, according to their own media outlet buzzer. This is what liberty looks like. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon in the next video.